Arragon.
Hello, my name is DeKeesh. I'm an economist, and I just wanted to bring you some breaking news.
Arragon. Ow! 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 Ow!
New Zealand's drought, it's the worst in decades, over 30 years. Is unparalleled example of the superstorm coming.
Countdown to economic collapse.
Although New Zealand may seem on the other side of the world, it's just the same as it is here in America. Now the fire zones and the parchment of the lands are becoming intolerable. Whole ecosystems are in danger of destruction, and fallow water holes are now drying up with years of animals who can no longer sustain themselves. The daily temperatures in the United States have been rising as well. Since the Great Depression, we've not had a greater drought in the United States as we do currently. And 1936 precipitation, you can see the belt, the midland and the beltway of our food supply is almost entirely scorched red. It's a collapse, a crumbling of our food supplies. In addition, Greenland is having unprecedented ice sheet loss. The same is going on in New Zealand. So New Zealand is the harbinger for the rest of the world.
We've had droughts before, but the last decade has seen, in my opinion, a lot more droughts and coming more frequently and closer together. So the impact is huge now in terms of overall financial cost, and also for production systems themselves, you know, seriously looking at having to change our methods and the consequences of all that.
New Zealand, parched as the worst drought in 30 years, takes its toll. Authorities in Wellington, New Zealand, have issued an outright ban on outdoor water usage entirely, as the worsening drought has siphoned off the available supply to less than half the normal levels and prompted the government to declare the worst water shortage in 30 years. New Zealand's capital, home to more than 200,000 people, has just 19 days' supply of water left in its reserves. Of course, the water supply situation is now approaching extreme. The Greater Wellington Regional Council said in a statement on its website, adding that it's also taking residents to task to cut indoor water usage to help us avoid a crisis, a water crisis.
I've been a dairy farmer in Mata here, which is about 20 k's south of Whangarei, for over 30 years. I'm born and raised here, and I've been a farm owner now for the last decade or so. Check the water in the trough. Normally speaking anyway, this farm is self-sufficient in its milking platform, which is 250 cows. And that is, we make enough feed on farm usually to support stock through dry periods such as this, so long as they're not extensive, so long as, you know, that's a normal dry summer, say maybe 4 to 6 weeks of drought.
Even if the current drought eases soon, the long-term picture isn't rosy, according to client scientists. The National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research predicts that farmers in the southern part of North Island, the area around Wellington, will spend up to 10% more time per year in drought by the middle of the century. It's only going to get worse. The collapse has begun.
Countdown to economic collapse.
The United States is headed for a total collapse.
New Zealand has been declared a drought zone, and Auckland on Thursday issued an outdoor fire ban. That's going to have a deleterious effect on recreation and camping. Of course, the Wellington City Council said urgent action had to be taken to ensure that homes and businesses have sufficient water. Water levels in our local rivers, the source of our water supply, are extremely low and dropping, the council said in a statement.
North Island drought worst in history. This is the North Island of New Zealand. Drought gripping the North Island is the most severe in history, with the crisis far from over, both for now and in the years to come, scientists say. Long, dry spells are forecast to double by 2040 as temperatures continue to rise and New Zealand heads towards a more Mediterranean climate.
This is Nelson. It's the 14th of March 2013, and here we have a perfect example of a sunset through particulate cloud sprayed by chemtrails. This trail was just sprayed about 20 minutes ago. As you can see, it's dispersing through the sky. New Zealand has a drought because of this. Wake up, New Zealand. Wake up, world. This is serious. This is your children and your children's children. This is our oxygen, this is our air, this is our health.
It's been so dry in the first 9 weeks of this year. It's more like an Ethiopian climate than a Mediterranean one. But what's changed? Let's have a look at some satellite imagery over New Zealand and the adjacent areas. What you'll see is that New Zealand is being subjected to weather modification. Here we have a lot of cloud material not far from the North Island, and we have a lot of aerosol trails. A known consequence of putting particulates into the atmosphere is drought inducement, because when the atmosphere is saturated with particulates, there are too many condensation nuclei for rain droplets to form into a reasonable size. It's no coincidence that drought inducement is listed as one of the objectives in the 1996 US Air Force document, Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025. Here's another satellite image on Weather Wars. I've got these holes here, small holes there, and the description: another wet storm is headed into California with the heaviest of the rains south of San Francisco. Active suppression of the rains and environment directly ahead of the storm is evident with a few of the oval holes. Negative energy imprints pointed out.
Countdown to economic collapse.
The United States is headed for a total collapse.
With holes in the ozone, one can expect cancer to spike as UV rays rise. Ultraviolet radiation, of course, is able to come through the holes in the ozone, and there's a particularly large hole currently over Antarctica, as well as parts of New Zealand. A sun-drenched summer has prompted doctors to recommend skin cancer checks after a spike in ultraviolet radiation in New Zealand. Wellington is the brightest big city last month, and also had the sunniest February since records began in 1928, clocking in an astounding 281 sunshine hours. Skin cancer monitoring and service MoleMap analyzed Niue data and found that a 17% increase in the ultraviolet radiation index from mid-December to the end of February, compared with the same period last year, Dr. Gray said. Ultraviolet radiation A can penetrate glass and clouds and can imitate and also increase the growth of skin cancers. Ultraviolet radiation B is responsible for burning, tanning, the acceleration of skin aging, and plays a significant role in the development of skin cancers. Currently, children are not allowed, according to federal guidelines, to be out on the beaches without sunshade over their entire bodies, as well as a sturdy hat to keep off the cancer-causing radiation. Skin cancer killed about 400 people last year, with melanoma being the most serious, Dr. Gray said. The best protection was shade, clothing, and sunblock. Regular skin assessments by a doctor could also help reduce the risk of cancer developing. But where are you going to hide? You have to go outside sometime. And with increasingly large holes and rips in the ozone layer, is going to be becoming more and more of a serious health concern. Currently, the highest temperature was recorded at 34.6 centigrade, recorded in Alexandria on February 1st. Dave McGaviston doesn't mince words when he says it's the worst season in 40 years of farming. He's just returned from a meeting with the bank and is expected to be $200,000 below budget on his sheep farming. Day after day of baking temperatures as high as 35 degrees Celsius since November has sucked out of the ground what little rain has fallen and left his property barren and unable to support his stock. And of course, when you can't afford to support your stock, you have to kill them or harvest them early at a tremendous loss. And as he's unable to fatten his lambs properly, he had to sell many very light and took a big loss in the market. Many farmers will make big losses this year, he said. The bank manager said there would be farmers who would go under. Stress levels are very high, and it's very hard to keep your morale up. What are you going to do? Start storing water?
But 12 weeks of drought, things start to get more serious. So this farm's now has been putting in a lot of haylage. We make off farm also and bought in, but that's been gone through. So now we're buying in palm kernel, and we'll continue to do so for the remainder of the drought, so which could be another 3 months. So there's a huge input cost. In terms of tonnage, well, you know, the basic maintenance of a dairy animal is between 8 and 10 kgs a day. That's a maintenance, let alone to milk as well on that. So you do the maths on that, you know, there's best part of several tonnes a week going through the system, and that's at palm kernel prices of over $300, so it's expensive.
Scarcity, of course, means the lack of a commodity. When the supply declines and the demand remains the same, price will rise, the equilibrium price point. This is a well-known fact of economics. It's an iron law of economics. Demand and supply are meeting at the point of equilibrium, and you knock out the balance of the supply and demand, and you will see radical price movements either up or down, which can have a net consumer loss in terms of allocated efficiency. So number one, you're going to be having a misallocation in the market due to wild price fluctuations from this climate change. This is credible breaking story that you must be aware of in order to ride out the upcoming global economic superstorm.
3 droughts in 4 years is not something we'd expect. The usual is perhaps 1, maybe 2. So to have 3 in 4 years is placed a huge strain, especially on the Northland economy, because it's nearly a $1 billion industry, the dairy industry and the agricultural industry in Northland. So this will place a huge, it's just not on the dairy farmers, it's the service industries, it's the local schools, it's the contractors, it has a wide-reaching effect on rural communities.
The drought has had a major impact on farmers who estimate the drought has so far cost them about $820 million in lost export earnings. Of course, that's going to impact the gross domestic product of New Zealand, its consumption, investment, savings, government expenditures, plus the net of imports and exports. So this is going to have a deleterious effect on the GDP growth rates of New Zealand, as well as forcing farmers to reduce their herds and also curtailing milk production. We're beginning to see a decline in milk production already. So not only are the water and food systems being highly affected, but also the balance of trade for the entire country.
This is our 3rd drought in 4 years. So it's huge this time, and it's a little bit later than usual, but the worry is that farmers that capitalised their short-term debt during the 2010-11 droughts are now facing added financial hardships.
Already, food is a good item to store, but how much water can you store? You can use upwards of a gallon of water per day. In addition, there is real pressure on the store cattle market and on the store lamb market as well, with prices very cheap right now. And of course, no one else is able to raise their livestock, but next year it's going to be even hotter, and the prices are going to be in the long run, we are all dead.
Countdown to economic collapse.
The United States is headed for a total collapse. And it's not going to be just financial collapse.
That hurts. Arragon. Oh, I'm sorry, did I hit you? Arragon. Arragon, follow my finger. Follow my finger. Look. Look. Follow my finger. Oh, Arragon. Say bye. Ah!
Gasp on your knees.
Arragon.
Search for your freedom. Don't stop now. Don't stop now.